I remember this block from my early childhood memories because my uncle, Eusebio, used to live a block away from here, right above the Gonzalez, no relation, funeral parlor. My brother married one of the Figueroa sisters who lived in the private house right next to the funeral parlor. So we used to come here. I mean, we were coming here through the 60s, and even after we moved away from the neighborhood, we started coming back in the 70s. And what I remember was, you know, a lot of family memories around this block. My uncle always liked to throw parties. You know, my cousins were a little wild. I remember my cousin Jimmy once converted half of his bedroom into a bird cage where he kept some falcons that he had trapped on some gas tanks. It's pretty wild. And then, you know, we used to go to like New Year's parties and whatnot at the Figueroa house. So I remember that. And it wasn't until after we'd moved away a while and come back in the 70s, the mid-70s, that I noticed some of the other area changing drastically, especially going back to like where we used to live on Beck Street, where even in the 60s, I remember, you know, friends of my father talking about how they were getting mugged. I remember one guy, Don Leonicio, who was like this always really dapper dude with a gold tooth. Him and his old lady was up there getting ready to go out dancing and whatnot, even though it was like 3 in the afternoon. But I remember once he told the story about how he got mugged getting off the 6 train on Southern Boulevard, and what really upset him was that he was mugged by another Puerto Rican. That's what really flipped him out, that another Puerto Rican would dare to mug him, a Puerto Rican. I remember that as a child. That was like one of the signposts, how the neighborhood was changing, that we would turn on our own. You know, that made a very big impression on me as a child. I would come back because my cousin lived on Beck, right on Longwood. So I was still coming back in the 70s to visit them. And you just saw things were starting to fall apart a lot and what have you. And then by the time I came back as a young journalist in the 80s, the cycle had pretty much been completed. I mean, the devastation was pretty much complete. You know, lots of empty blocks, very little new construction at that point. I mean, there was some further north by Charlotte Street, but around here it hadn't been rebuilt yet. And it was pretty desolate, you know. It was very sad because you just felt like this thing had hit rock bottom. And the people who could afford to get out left. And luckily over the years I've been able to keep on coming back and you know, just by driving around and visiting friends. I still got relatives who work over on Oneida Street and what have you, and Mike Amadeo up the block, I know Mikey, so you know, I go by there and whatnot. And you've been able to see a lot of the rebuilding, which is good. But don't let the physical rebuilding fool you. I think there's great need in this community still. That's one of the things that's very different, I think. Yeah, the word facade is a very interesting word because it's, you know, it is what the public sees, what you put up in front, and it's what's behind that facade are people who are still in need. I mean, you know, as we know now, there are working families that have trouble making ends meet just to cover the basics like food and what have you. And so yeah, there are these nice new buildings, but don't let that fool you because of the economic situation. And like, you know, it has always been thus in the Bronx that, you know, we're the first ones, we're like the canaries in the coal mine. We're the first ones to tell you that, you know, shit's gonna get hectic. You know, the economy's gonna tank. You know why? Because we feel it first. And I think it's the same thing now. Same thing now. And it's more disconcerting, it's more hidden because, you know, we did rebuild and we did, you know, make significant strides forward, and yet there's the need still. Back then, you know, the community had not been physically rebuilt, the social ties had been frayed rather severely. And now, you know, you have some rebuilding, but, you know, the need is even bigger, I think. It's more hidden in some ways now, the need. I mean, if we go right around the corner, though, actually, 2 blocks around the corner from here to La Iglesia Española, La Iglesia Evangélica Española, they give out a food pantry that, you know, it's like, you know, hundreds of people getting a free sack of food, and they give out a soup kitchen where they feed hundreds of people. So there's great need. And frankly, I mean, I've seen food lines in the neighborhood that I never saw before, the really long ones, which tells you that, you know, there's still a great deal of way to come here. So, you know, it's a mixed blessing. It's you know, bittersweet, whatever you want to say, that, you know, the landscape of our youth has been obliterated. You know, that was the first major emotional blow for me, was to see all the signposts of my childhood gone, a lot of them anyway. And then, you know, you see the rebuilding, and that's good, but then you don't want to forget that there's great need in this city, because if all you see is Manhattan, then you have no idea what this was and what this still faces. You know, so I mean, that for me is the significance of this neighborhood.